Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here, and we are going to be tackling a really important topic today in terms of not only like you becoming just a more critically thinking human being, but then also just the idea that it is a legacy of humanity, the African slave trade, that we really have to dive into. We're going to talk about and kind of detail some more. So before we get started on this, please make sure you click on your appropriate pair right there and then respond to one of these questions on Pair Deck. You can see this is the screen that you should be getting. Then you can just type or draw, whatever you would like to do. When you're ready, you can continue on with me with the rest of the video. So what are we going to be trying to accomplish today? First of all, we want to take the time, just like we did for Native peoples in the Americas. We want to talk about what Africa was like before Europeans show up. And then second, in an attempt to not just treat Africans as these massive people that are somehow just like powerless against Europeans, which definitely wasn't the case, we are going to try to put them at kind of the center of the story and try to show you some ways that they tried to remain in control of their worlds, even despite being enslaved. So before we go on, there's a link right here that I'd like you to check out. These are words from Africa that you might know. If you recognize any of them, please type them over here to the right side. All right, and going on now, let's talk about our mini lesson. Okay, so this is going to be really the primary spot that I'm going to spend my time today. But once we're done with that, just be aware there is an additional plus stuff reading that you'll want to get done that comes from Mr. Aristotle, and we'll talk about that kind of here at the end. So first of all, our essential questions: how do people preserve and control their cultural traditions and their heritage? And then what are some of the major effects of mass migration? So two difficult questions there that we are going to have to kind of wrangle with. All right, so Africa, a little bit of context. Africa is an immensely complicated and complex space. It is one massive continent. Literally, you can stuff like the United States, most of Europe, parts of China in Africa, and still have room. There are hundreds and hundreds of different ethnic, linguistic groups. It's immensely complex and deserves way more study than what we have time to do here. The thing that we're going to try not to do is try to teach slavery from singularly from just a European point of view. That is going to be a disaster if we do that. And for example, like one of the byproducts of doing that sometimes is that we treat African peoples like they're this helpless mass of folks that have no ability for free will, or agency. And that's a problem. What I'm going to try to show you here is that despite slavery and it being a terrible catastrophe and tragedy, African peoples did act to manipulate their worlds and environments to try to remain in control. Okay? So again, Africa is huge, super large, diverse. It's crazy complicated, which is kind of what I said earlier. So before Europeans, what's it like? Well, because much of the history in Africa was orally transmitted, okay, it's the same for native peoples in the Americas. We only know fragments of information, and that makes stuff really hard. But here's kind of some of the big points that we do know. They were also, just like Native Americans, ethno-linguistically grouped, okay, generally into different tribes that were, again, ethno-linguistically organized. The family, okay, was passed matrilineally, which, again, we know from studying Native Americans means through the mother. Religion, there's kind of a funny line in Africa. There's something called the 10th degree parallel, which is just above the equator. So if, this is the 10th degree line in Africa, everything above that line is generally Islam. Everything south of that will turn out to be later Christianity. But we're getting complicated. So elsewhere at this time, if it's not in the south and it's not Christianity, you're looking at a blend of African polytheism, Islam, and then eventually Christianity will make its way in once Europeans really start going crazy. Now, when Europeans do show up, okay, there's simply no singular response that I can give you as to how Africans respond. Many of them see benefits with trading with Europeans, which does include male slaves. Some will convert to Christianity. Others will blend it with their own traditional African polytheistic religions. Completely depends, is kind of the best answer I can give you. Sometimes, and I'll show you an example of this here, not only are Africans going to see the benefits of trading with Europeans, but they're going to use it to actually increase their own power relative to the people around them. So in some ways, it kind of gets flipped back upon itself. Okay. Now, what are we talking about here? Like, what's our main focus? Our focus today is going to be in this blue area, this particular slave trade, and that's what we're going to kind of harken in on, okay, and how that occurs. But since we mentioned trade, and I guess we'll bring it up now. The Ashanti people are a good example of a process that happens in Africa. And again, it's not the only explanation for slavery by any means, but the Ashanti, and that's how you pronounce their name, it's Asante, were strong participants in what were called the gun slave cycle. Okay, so what will happen is that the Ashanti would use Europeans to make themselves more powerful, and how they would do this is they would go to their neighbors, they would conquer them, sell them into slavery. Again, these are other Africans capturing other Africans. They would then sell them to Europeans, buy more guns, conquer more of their neighbors, and the cycle just repeats. And the Ashanti kings make themselves immensely powerful from this. And again, it's not just trading in slaves, it's also just general trade for other goods, such as rum and things like that. But yeah, that's kind of the general process, at least for the Ashanti. So what I'd like you to do is to check out this video right here, okay, on the Atlantic slave trade. And I see that I'll have to update this link so that way you can actually click on the globe and watch. What you will need to do, and I'll make sure that I have this corrected on here, is there will be a video that will be linked on this globe. And you click it, you watch it. Once that happens, then you need to, and I'll probably have to fix this too, you will drag this onto the correct spot where most slaves went to from Africa. So where did most go? North America, the Caribbean, South America? I don't know. So drag your icon there, and once you do that, okay, again, you want to click this globe. You'll watch the entire transatlantic slave trade in 2 minutes. You can carry on with me, okay? Let's go on. Now, the Middle Passage. Okay, the Middle Passage is the name that we give to the actual journey from Africa, okay, to the Americas. Now, you should have seen in that video that actually the vast majority of slaves do not go to North America. They either go to predominantly Brazil, and again, that's because the Portuguese really are the ones leading off the slave trade, or then perhaps the Caribbean. North America is kind of like a third spot that, you know, some end up as. Which for me I always found surprising, but again, I think that's kind of we come from this very painful background and legacy of slavery in the United States. Now, the Middle Passage, what's it like? It's brutal. It's really, really harsh. It's about 3 months trip, okay, on average. You have hundreds of different slaves from different ethnicities and groups stuffed onto a ship as tightly packed. There we go. As possible, and it is incredibly hot, sweaty. Again, you would have you can see the pictures there of how Europeans will kind of essentially treat them like, you know, cattle, right? And the idea is that the more slaves you get over there, even if, you know, a fifth of them die, you know, the better. Now, again, 10 to 15% are going to die on the journey. Actually, more slaves are going to die just getting to the ships than they actually will like on the trip itself. And it's going to be the mass movement of anywhere from 10 to 16 million slaves. That all being said, slaves will attempt to take back control when they, you know, are captured or are in the middle of getting transported. They'll revolt. Slave revolts on ships did occur. They'll commit suicide. They'll try to jump overboard and drown rather than be shipped off to some new land they're not ready for. And then eventually Europeans will start to do things like, you know, only a certain amount of hours out on deck. They'll install suicide nets so that slaves can't actually jump overboard. It is an incredibly hot, sweaty, brutal experience. And again, that's called the Middle Passage. What I thought I might show you, though, and again, because we're trying to kind of understand like how Africans are trying to maintain their worlds here, is a specific island that I'd like to show you, okay? And it's called Barbados. So it's a little tiny island right here. In the Caribbean. It's kind of off the coast of Venezuela. It was one of the most important British slave colonies in the Caribbean. And in Barbados, it's sugarcane. And the British send slaves there, and they just die in the thousands. It's incredibly, incredibly harsh. And sugarcane is a very heavy kind of manual labor. But what's kind of funny about Barbados, and why I wanted to bring it up to you, is because a few years into the slave trade, whole groups of slaves get shipped from Barbados to Charleston, South Carolina, and they get put to work in the rice fields there in South Carolina. And what slaves do is they take their community and their background in African languages and English that they've now been exposed to, and they invent a new language called Gullah. Okay, there's a video right here. Please, please, please check it out. It's awesome. Okay, once you do that, we'll kind of explain why they do it. So go ahead and watch, okay? What Gullah is it's an invented language. And if you heard the gal talking there in the video, she's, when they say words like Bakra, and they're talking about the slave master doesn't know that they're talking about him. So the invented language is a means of resistance, which is really, really cool. The last example that I thought I might show you is actually not one in America, but it's still kind of cool. It's Haiti. And in Haiti, and also in other places, Europeans, okay, Catholic Christianity will get mixed in with traditional African polytheism, and it will create a new religion called Voodoo. Okay, and if you've heard of voodoo, it is not like the dolls that you stick pins into. It's much more complicated than that, and it's also it's much more symbolic than simply that. What is it? It's an example of what we call religious syncretism, and that's when religions start to bleed together and they start to kind of merge and mesh in ways that are really, really cool and really interesting. So, for example, if you're familiar with Our Lady of Guadalupe Hidalgo, if you or Our Lady of Guadalupe, did I say Guadalupe Hidalgo? Our Lady of Guadalupe, that woman, okay, in Mexican folklore / Christianity, that is robbed straight from Catholic Christianity, right? But what's really cool about voodoo is that the whole idea about it is manipulating control, and a lot of it has to deal with spirits and stuff like that. So, for example, like if you're getting beat by your master senselessly, you could curse him to maybe have he wouldn't have any more children, right? And if it worked, awesome, and it gives you this feeling of empowerment. And then being able to heal your children when again you're a slave and you wouldn't have access to medicine in the sense of like the 21st century that we're aware of it. It again gives you tools for resistance. So I thought I might link it right here, where you can actually go check out some voodoo in action in Haiti. Now again, I'm not endorsing to go try voodoo. Okay, it's just a cool example of kind of slaves trying to remain in control of everything. So what I'm gonna have you do here is draw or type in Pear Deck a 3, 2, 1 exit ticket. Okay, 3 things you learned, 2 questions you have, 1 way what you learned connects to today's world. And once you do that, just a reminder that you do have homework in the plus stuff reading. Just be aware what this thing is, and I'll give you a brief description before you go and check it out. It's called On Masters and Slaves. It's from Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. And the reason why I've put this in here for you, and we kind of check this out in this course, is that for Southern slave owners who we're going to meet here pretty soon, a lot of them are versed in the European like what they would have called at that time the classics. So like people like the Greeks and the Romans and those kind of things. And like many colonists who were upper class, especially elites, would be fluent in, for example, Greek, just because they could and they were, were fancy and they had the time. The thing that I want to show you guys with this is that this reading is an example of what elite plantation slaveholders, plantation owners would pass between each other as like common understandings of knowledge about, slave owning. Now, of course, obviously we have huge issues with agreeing with their logic, right? But at the same time, I think it's important that we take the time so we can understand the context of their mind and their thinking, so that we can, deconstruct it and ultimately make ourselves better. So my advice with this reading is this. First of all, take it slow. Okay, it's Aristotle, which means that he's going to write and he's going to also think in ways that you may not be used to. Okay. Second, he's making an argument here. And so I would encourage you to think about the metaphor that we did a few classes ago about the structure of a house. Aristotle is trying to build a structure of an argument that is logical and has evidence and those kind of things. And if you can understand the structure that he's building, like the building blocks and how they fit together, it's going to serve you really, really well. Okay. So I will see you guys next time in our next video, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.